Hello. Thank you for being here. Welcome to this Yale session at the GMAT Club Essay Workshop. My name is Kirsty, and I'll be your host today. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Shell of Dr. Shell Consulting and MBA Admit. In this session, we're going to walk you through the MBA essays for Yale step by step, and just so you can get some insight on how to prepare a strong essay for your own applications. There will be time for Q&A, so please submit your questions in the Q&A section, and then you can feel free to upvote the ones that you're most interested in. So with that, Dr. Shell, go ahead and get started.
Okay, great. It's wonderful to be here. We're very excited to walk you through today some essays that are for Yale, so you can hopefully learn how to make a very strong application and enhance your odds of success. So, my name is Dr. Shell. I'm the founder and president of Dr. Shell Consulting, which is the home of MBA Admit. We are here to provide executive coaching and to coach our clients on how to access outstanding educational opportunities. Yale is an amazing institution, as many of you know. So I'm very happy to be talking about that today. Before I get into everything, I do want to just mention that for any of you who are interested, we are happy to give you a free profile evaluation. So if you're interested to know what we think of the strength of your candidacy, feel free to reach out to us at mbaadmit.com. And then we do have special pricing that only goes through this Friday for people who have attended this webinar. So if you're interested, take a look at this. It'll also flash at the end, and we're more than happy to be trying to give you some assistance as you put your application together. So again, I'm Dr. Shell. I've been providing admissions coaching for over 30 years. I work with M7 candidates, the top 20 schools, as well as executive MBA candidates. And so we bring a lot of expertise to you and do really hands-on one-to-one coaching. So let's get into today's session about the Yale essays. The one thing I want you to bear in mind as you start to think about your essays is that there's three main areas that the admissions committee is assessing in order to decide if you look like a very attractive candidate. And so it is professional success, academic success, and success as a leader in the community. Sometimes varsity sports can substitute for leader in the community. By varsity sports, I mean when you were playing for a team that represented your school against other teams, so colleges at the college level. A fourth area is a strong personal story. So if someone has a strong personal story, something about their background that's very distinctive or shows that they overcame obstacles, um, feel free to bring that into the application process. That also makes you more unique. And so again, elevates you from the crowd and makes you more attractive as a candidate. So just bear in mind that those are main areas that they're assessing. And your key as you're putting the application together is to strategize about what are your most distinctive credentials and achievements. And then once you have a strong understanding of that, you want to try to get it into the application somewhere. Every single application will have a different opportunity to get it in. Some of these applications have very short essays, and so therefore you may have to work with your recommendation writers more extensively to make sure the stories get in that way. You want to use your resume effectively, allow that to be a snapshot of your candidacy that showcases your strengths in the main three areas. And then the application form also gives you some space. But just take a good look at the entire application and try to understand where are you getting those great credentials in, how are you going to highlight them? Now, the distinctive aspect about the Yale content, unfortunately, is that you do have very limited space to make your case. The essay content is very short. And so, what that means is that the resume is going to be particularly important because you may not be able to get some of those great credentials into the essay content. And then the recommendations become really important also. The recommendations tend to be long, and so you want to help your recommendation writer know like what stories it would be nice for them to get in the event that you're not able to get it into the essay space. So the recommendations, I'm about to show you the questions if you haven't seen them. But essentially, there is no word limit because the very last prompt doesn't have a word limit, and you can put as many words there as you want. And therefore, they're free to be long. And so, our typical recommendation is about 1,200 to 1,400 words. Above 1,400 tends to feel too long. And so, I don't encourage really beyond 1,400 words. But that's usually more space than you have in all your essays. And so the opportunity to get some great content in there is significant. And so you want to take advantage of that. Understand that the recommendations impact as heavily as the essays in terms of your outcomes. And then so really use that as an opportunity to showcase your candidacy and present your case for admission. Quickly, I know we want to move to the essays, but let's just take a look at what the content of the recommendation requests. One of the main questions is this one about how does the performance of the applicant compare to that of other well-qualified individuals? That is a really important question, and so you want some fantastic content in that. And then they have one at the end that says, "Is there anything else we should know?" And again, it's no word limit there. So you're free to put as much as you want. And so again, deep dive there. Give some great stories, some great credentials and traits that they're highlighting. Be sure to make that a big part of what you're doing as you're preparing your application is to work with your recommendation writers. There is also a recommendation grid. That is going to be the first visual that they have of your recommendation. So if it's marked poorly, it can actually be very damaging because by the time they get to the actual text of the recommendation, they've already been told that you're not very strong. And so talk to your recommendation writer and maybe talk to them about how you'd like to be marked on this. But know that this is one example of the 12 areas they're assessing. This one is influence and collaboration. And then you would be choosing from each of these options here. So no basis for judgment all the way down to the last one. Usually the last one, the farthest from the actual trait, is the strongest. And so just see, how they can mark you and make sure that that's going to be a good visual as they start to read the recommendations. All right, so let's get into the essays. The first one that I say to answer is the career interests one. So you sometimes will go to that main essay, which is longer, but you don't want to have a lot of overlap. So in sometimes it's a lot better to go ahead and answer this one first, so you know what you're going to be saying, and you minimize the overlap for the main essay. So 200 words is not long, but it is long enough to pack a punch in here. And so the question is briefly describe your career interests and how you arrived at them. What have you already done to pursue these interests? And what do you need to do going forward? This, in many ways, really is just a standard goals essay, but you just have a very small amount of space to answer this question. So let's go to a sample. I will, in the interest of time, not read everything here, but I will skip over some parts and summarize them. But let's just look at this career essay sample. 1 year ago, when I traveled back to my original home country of Thailand, I spent time in an impoverished rural town. As a naturalized American traveling to a developing country for the first time in 15 years, I was genuinely amazed by the poor conditions of the farms and homes. I thought there had been more progress since my family immigrated to the United States. But in this small town, people struggled in small tin and cardboard homes, and everywhere youngsters scavenged for food scraps. I resolved to play a part in addressing such conditions. Upon returning to New York, I began volunteering at a local food bank for homeless people. I came to understand that giving back to people less fortunate is where my true career passion lies. Today, I dream of founding and growing a nonprofit that will have a profound social impact on emerging country populations lacking access to adequate food, sanitation, clean water, and electricity. I can equally see myself working at a high level in an existing organization with this focus. I've already built a strong skill set through my work as an analyst at a leading bank in New York. To achieve my career vision successfully, I need to acquire more knowledge about social entrepreneurship. Yale is my obvious choice given the school's deep commitment to social entrepreneurship. Yale's renowned faculty and talented students will help me gain relevant knowledge, and I look forward to growing as a leader. Okay, so this is the essay. And for me, there's a lot of flaws and weaknesses. Okay, so starting out, they say 1 year ago, this trip had an impact on me. And so it's very recent. They're saying, I want to shape my entire career around this one trip that moved me emotionally. And so that may not actually be very convincing to the committee that this is truly what they want to do. Now, the bigger problem is that they didn't in the application. And by the way, this is a representation of someone who had been, they applied on their own and did not get into Yale the first time. We worked with them and they were admitted when we worked with them on a reapplication. But as we went through their material in terms of their background, they actually did have work that they had done that was relevant for this in their extracurricular life. But the application they put forward originally did not indicate that. So we saw nothing in the professional profile, nothing in the extracurricular profile that hinted at an interest in working with an emerging economy or the challenges that are there. And so it just didn't resonate as really what this person wanted to do. And so the admissions committee, when you name something as a goal that you just don't have a background in, that you're not professionally related to it, you don't have extracurriculars related to it, they believe that you just think you want to do this, but you really don't know because you've not been in the field. And so oftentimes that alone is going to be a basis for rejection because their attitude is, if this is really what you want to do, go get some experience in this field and then come to us. Because otherwise, it really is saying that you're going to depend on the MBA for giving you all the relevant experience and knowledge of this area. And the admissions committee generally wants you to bring something to the table in terms of experience. And again, to really know that you want to do it, not to just think it because there's an idea in your mind. So that was a problem. And in the reapplication, we did elevate the work that was relevant that this person had done, both professionally and in the extracurricular camp. And there was a stronger theme because of that. Another flaw for this was they pointed out as evidence of, the fact that they have this passion. They said, I volunteered at a local food bank for homeless people. That does not actually relate specifically to the area they're saying they want to deal with, which is emerging economies, impoverished communities abroad, inadequate food, sanitation, clean water, and electricity. So they're offering that, which actually wasn't the right thing to offer. They did actually have some credentials that were relevant. And so again, it presents a more weaker view through this essay. Another thing that I think was not so great was that when they talked about what they were interested in terms of addressing the needs of populations that lack adequate food, sanitation, clean water, and electricity, it's just so broad a swath that you really wanted to narrow it down to things that were more related. So if they said, you know, inadequate food and clean water, that would kind of make sense. They go together. Sanitation and electricity, okay, more infrastructure, so that would make sense. But it's so big that we're just, again, it feeds into the idea that this person may not really know what they want to do. And then as much as they're saying they want to impact it, they didn't say how would they impact it. Would they start a nonprofit that raises funds and, gives money to individuals or organizations? Will they leverage technology? Like, how are they going to impact it? And so there's no hint of that, which again will make it a weaker essay. And then finally, when you get to the last paragraph, I'm sorry, let's go back to that. Just bounced for a little too soon there. Um, when you get to the last paragraph here, um, the language is really just too broad. Okay, so they're talking about Yale is my obvious choice. It's got a deep commitment to social, entrepreneurship, renowned faculty, talented students. That you could write for any institution, and so it really wasn't specific to Yale. So even if this is a very short essay, you want to keep the space to add some details to show that, look, I've really researched this program and I'm convinced that this is a fit. And so go to the website, get some course names, get some names of special programs, it really just give us some meat there. And so reserve 2 to 3 sentences at the end and pack a punch, pack those details in there to demonstrate that you really have done your homework and you're convinced that this is a fit. So let's go on to the main essay. Um, you have 3 options, and at the end, if you have questions about, what one of these is ideal for you, we can discuss that a bit. But literally, it's a decision you can't really make until after you lay out, what are your most distinctive achievements and credentials? And so once you have a strong understanding of that and what will be the most dominant and useful themes for you strategically in the application, then you might know which of these to choose. But in some ways, some of them are a little bit interchangeable, but you just have to sort of say to yourself, which of these fits me? Now, the candidate chose commitment, and let's take a look at what they wrote. So again, you have the choice of what's the biggest commitment you've made, describe a community that's been meaningful to you, and what's the most valuable thing you gained. and that you contributed to this community. And then what's the most significant challenge you face? So those are the three options. You answer one of them in 500 words. In our sample, let's read through some of this. The biggest commitment I've ever made was to my father. 5 years ago, he took me for a long walk and asked me to make him a promise. My family had relocated from Thailand to Iowa, and my family thanked me for working during college and sending money back to our family. However, he requested that I promise not to fret over supporting our family financially. He said he did not want me to consider our family's financial situation when making my career choices from then onward or then forward. He wanted me to follow my dreams. I promised. The next paragraph, he talks about the in detail the family situation that it was always dominant in his mind. That's why he worked so hard in high school. It's why he dreamed of going to college in the USA. He talked about the fact that his parents had been poor factory workers. They could only attain low wage jobs in the USA. Sometimes they had to manage on one income. He was determined to help. And so when he went to college, he got a job working 30 hours a week. He sent back money to the family. It made a difference. Despite the hard hours, he earned a decent grade point average, and he was then able to get a great job at a respected investment bank. He then the next second to last paragraph, he talks about sometimes I feel guilty that, I made this promise and I'm now focusing on my own dreams. And then the last paragraph, he says, a year ago, I came to realize that I really wanted to build a social entrepreneurial venture in the future. I want to give back, and, and I'm excited to end Yale. So again, this was the basis for essentially not getting in the first time. And what I felt was missing was it's a nice essay, but the goal of the essay is to help you get into the school. And so I just don't feel like this essay was really the right topic. And so if someone felt strongly about having this story, I would have condensed essentially a lot of the points that were made into maybe the first 25% of the essay and then taken the values that were derived from that experience and then showed how those values had then produced fruit since then. So whether you're focused on extracurricular, professional, that you would show how this person then took this experience and then has impacted others and brought great outcomes based on that. So an essay more reoriented that way would help more to advance toward admission. And so, that was like this one needed a big overhaul. The other thing I'd want to say is that this particular candidate did have some outstanding traits. Okay, so they had worked their way to become student body president, even though they had the demands of the work that they were doing, and still struggling also to maintain a decent GPA. And so that great leadership story and some of the achievements that they had as that student body president would have been a wonderful thing to showcase here because not only did it show an ability to excel in a very difficult situation, but it also showed the ability to, build bridges. Some of the things that they did in terms of outcomes in the work, help diversify the faculty, help talk about with the administration ways to attract a more diverse faculty, ways to build bridges among different groups of the student population that didn't historically interact as much. And so there's a lot of wonderful stuff, which would have made a better topic in terms of making this person unique, talking about what they could contribute when they were at Yale, stand out, all those things. So again, I thought that this was not the best use of the essay. The optional essay, every school is different, so do look at how they word optional essay. But for Yale, it says this is truly optional if no aspect of your application requires further explanation. Leave this area blank. And um, so they basically are saying use this for an explanation. They don't make a hard sort of dictate that it has to only be extenuating circumstances or negative information. But you want to be careful if you're going to use it for something positive because they just say explanation. So if something needs to be explained and it's positive information, that's fine. Most people would use it for explaining a weakness in their application. And so let's look at what this candidate did. So here we are. My college grades do not reflect my abilities. During college, unfortunately, I faced the burden of working nearly 30 hours weekly to help pay for my tuition. They talk about, again, the family situation of immigrating from Thailand and then the hardships of the COVID pandemic years. Then they go on, additionally, I had to live off campus and commute to work. The long journey made it hard to study. And then they go on in detail about the distractions and how hard it was then to try to, study and make good grades. And then the end, they ask, the committee to give them a chance to show that they have the skills and they can excel in the program. So again, one of the most common problems I see with an optional essay where there's a negative aspect to address is that the candidate uses the entire essay to go on and on and on about the weakness. And so that is not the right approach. Equally, another problem I see with optional essays is if someone has like two or three weaknesses, sometimes they put them all in there and they say, well, here's this one weakness, and oh, this other one, let me tell you a little bit about that, and oh, another one here. And so just in this one essay, they start to look like they're not a super great candidate to be bringing in. So try not to bring in more than about two weaknesses into this optional essay. But even if you have two, try to condense what you're talking about in terms of the negative aspect to about 25% or 30% of the essay. And then from there, redirect, acknowledge the weakness, explain why it was there, and then redirect. And so don't just say, please give me a chance. Say, here's all the other reasons why I'm a strong candidate and why you should admit me. And lay it out for them, make it very easy for them to understand all the strengths. And so this person, again, they excelled as student body president. They managed to have a decent GPA in spite of all the demands on their time. They were great at building bridges and bringing diverse people together. There's just a lot that they could have packed into this essay to summarize for the admissions committee why they're a great candidate. So again, a missed opportunity with this essay, and definitely could have been stronger. All right, so I'm just going to remind you again, we're about to go to the Q&A. If you're interested in a profile evaluation, please reach out to us. We're more than happy to let you know what we think about the strength of your candidacy. And then again, anyone who wants assistance, whether editing a strategy session, reviewing your material and giving you feedback, feel free to reach out to us. This is a very deep discount of our fees and is on until April 15th, so this Friday. Okay, so here we are, Q&A, and I'm happy to take some questions.
Great. Thank you so much. So, our first question is on the recommendation grid, is it okay if they don't select the strongest, but rather the second strongest because it's more apt? Will that be a huge ding? So, I don't know if they meant appropriate or if they really meant apt, but yeah,
Okay. Well, so when you look at some of those descriptions, some of them are just advanced for someone who's a full-time candidate. And so some of the schools actually use that same grid for executive candidates. And so I think that it's in some cases it's not realistic that you'd have the top one. And so it's okay to not have the top one. But you have to really literally look at each description, and the best case scenario is that most of them are at the top, and then maybe, four might be second highest. But what you don't really want is if they're in the middle across the board and then lower than that for, half of them. That's where the visual becomes quite bad. And so you just go point by point and try to see how high you can go. But I have seen some full-time candidates with most of them on the highest, but that's truly a top performer. Not everybody's at that level. And so again, second highest can be okay.
okay.
And just remember when it is second highest, the visual is still largely good, and then the text will kick in from there. And obviously try to have glowing text, where they're just raving about your skills. And so that would be a good situation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. The next one is any tips on how to write the consortium Y MBA essay in a way that proves good fit for multiple schools you may be applying to? So this is a little outside of Yale specifically, but um,
Okay.
still essay.
Okay, for those of you who don't know what the course consortium is for people who have candidates who have supported the mission of helping to bring more minorities into the business world. And so you don't have to be an underrepresented minority to be eligible for that, but you needed to have supported the mission. And so the consortium does enhance someone's odds of getting a full-time scholarship, I mean, a full ride. So it's definitely worth going through the consortium if you qualify for it. Um, but the thing is with the consortium, there's two main essays that are part of the consortium application that go to all the schools. And then each school, and Yale is part of that, will have specific essays just for that school. And so you're writing kind of two sets, but one set kind of, like I said, goes everywhere. You don't change it school to school. And then the other set for the school that, in this case, Yale, would be specific only to Yale. That's the only school that will see it. And so our approach to consortium has always been make those first two essays super strong because we feel that in essence you can land the school based on those two core essays. And so sometimes people applying to the consortium don't have resources to have the school essays edited also. And historically, what I've seen is that if you make those two core essays strong enough, people get the offers anyway, even if the school essays were not quite as strong. So if you're saying how to make it a good fit, the main essay really is a goals essay, and so it truly is laying out a strong vision of here's the success I've had to date. Here are my career goals. Here's the skills I've built over time. This is why business school is a great choice for me. And just making it strong and really just the goals that they're attractive, that you're looking to have impact, that they're clear, and then restating again the work experience in a compelling way, talking about all you've learned, all you have to give to business school. But it is worth working hard on those two core essays because, again, what I've seen over time is if that is strong enough, even if the school specific ones are not quite as strong as we would have wanted, the decision is made more on the core essays than the school essays.
Okay, great. Thank you for addressing that. The next question from Ayush says, with a technology background and prior industry experience, I aspire to transition into finance-focused roles post MBA. How can I frame my short-term and long-term goals so they appear both ambitious and realistic?
Can you read that one more time? I'm
Yeah,
sorry, from the
so
beginning.
yeah, so with a technology background and prior industry experience, I aspire to transition into finance-focused roles post MBA. So how can I frame my short-term and long-term goals so they appear both ambitious and realistic? So from technology to finance.
Okay. Well, so okay, so remember the perspective of the school. And the perspective of the school is they don't want to have a job placement problem on their hands. Okay, so if you don't do a good job of showing how you're going to get from where you've been to where you're going, then they may worry that upon graduation you haven't landed a job, and now that's going to hurt their statistics. And so you want to be very careful with that. But there's plenty of ways to do it. You just need to show. I always say it's like you're at space G. You're at, letter G on your trajectory, and you're saying, I want to go to P. And you have to show, just connect the dots. How am I getting from G to P? Now, some of that is consulting. Say I have these great skills. I'll go to management consulting. That will give me a broad set of experience. I'll be able to then narrow my experience and my focus onto financial related companies, and then I'll make a transition. So you're showing how you're going to make that transition. There could be the case that also those type of companies naturally are open to technical candidates. If that's the case, try to reach out to people who are in that entry level position that you'd be in after the MBA, who had a technical background. And then when you're writing the essay, you can say, I've talked to this person, that person who made this transition, and I'm aware of like what I need to do in terms of courses to take and internship in the summer. And so if you can show that again, there's a history of that sort of transition, you make your case as well. So there's multiple ways to do it to show that you can actually get to that spot, but you do have to try to do that because you want it clear to them how it's going to happen. And then ambitious, for the long term goals, you just obviously need to don't make it sound like you're trying to necessarily do something small in terms of an entrepreneurial venture, and then also don't make it sound like you are aiming too low. Sometimes people say, I just want to be a head of a division of this large company. And for certain schools, that doesn't sound ambitious enough. So, if I were you, I'd be trying to make sure that you will sound as if you're going to have impact and as if you're going to stand out from the crowd, because the more you stand out, the better for their degree.
Mhm. Okay. Great, thank you. Hopefully that
Mhm.
that helped. So
Sure.
then here's maybe an easier one. Um, are there penalties or for using acronyms or abbreviated words to save on word count? For example, reps for repetition.
Okay, so that's a character count issue, but if it was
That is, yeah.
reps, okay, so that's a character issue. No, there's not. You're fine to do that. And then if you use an acronym, just make sure that you spelled it out one time and then put it in parentheses so they know what it stands for. But otherwise, no, you're fine to do that.
Okay, perfect. Then, are there Yale specific values you see shine in the main essay question?
Well, Yale is very much known for social impact. And so obviously, if you have that as a natural part of your goals, you want to highlight that because they are attracted to that. But there's also other things that they are strong in, for example, healthcare. And so just understand like what the distinctives are. Go to the website. They actually lay everything out for you in terms of distinctives. And then to the degree that it connects with your particular goals and ambitions, then reinforce that in the themes that you're presenting.
Okay, great. Um, what are some of the most common mistakes applicants make in, especially maybe particularly in the Yale essays, and how to avoid those?
Um, Sometimes I see too much overlap between the career goals essay and then the main essay where you're saying the same things. And you have so little content in the Yale essay set that you want to really make sure everything that you're saying is value added. So that's one thing. Another thing is because the essay on the goals is so short, people are sometimes wordy and they use up the words way too fast. And so you need to tighten, tighten, tighten and say what you're saying more concisely so you can get more in. the
Hmm.
the essays didn't actually explicitly say why Yale, but you should answer that somewhere. And again, be very detailed in your response in terms of pulling out courses by name, special programs by name to show that I've done my research and I'm convinced that this is a fit. Because when the schools, choose to admit someone, they know that some of these candidates are very strong and can be admitted other places. And so if you are going to be admitted other places like Columbia or Wharton, they're going to want to know, why would you choose us over those schools? And the way you convince them that you would actually choose them is the fact that you're bringing in these details and you're saying, look at the time I took to figure out what this is all about. And because of what you offer and what I need, and there's such a match, I would choose you. And you want to make that clear in your application essays.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and you touched a little bit or a few times, I think, on word count and kind of being concise and making the best use of your space. But so then how can, excuse me, storytelling elements such as a hook or a conflict or something, resolution enhance the essay? And should you use the space to do those kinds of things? It's like
Um,
storytelling elements.
Right. The main essay gives you an opportunity because it's 500 words. And so that's it. I mean, some people, there's no one right way to admission. So some people use the essays and they'll read more like a fiction, novel sort of thing. Others is straight and, straightforward and more like a business writing. And both of them can get you to admission. But the key thing is that you're highlighting um, strengths that you have that will enhance the class. Somehow that's the underlying theme. And so whether someone wants to do a hook and conflict or whether it's going to be more straightforward in the writing style, both are fine as long as, again, the underlying narrative is that, here, look at the way I've developed, look at how I've impacted an environment, think about what I can do at Yale.
Okay, great. Okay, then, and just a reminder to everybody who's listening, if you have questions, type them in the Q&A, but I do have a couple more. What are some strategies for identifying and highlighting key experiences? So I think this is backing it up a little bit of like, what should you highlight through your life in order to include it in the essay?
Can you rephrase that one more time?
Yeah, yeah. Let me
I
just
wasn't sure
read
they're
it again.
talking about
Yeah,
the essay or the broader application. Can you just maybe?
yeah. I think, yeah, for the essays, what are some strategies for identifying and highlighting key experiences?
and then therefore choosing which one will go in the essay.
Hmm. Right.
Um, I would just look in those areas that I mentioned. So academic achievement, professional, extracurricular, like where are you showing leadership? Where are you showing impact? Where are you showing an influence on a situation? And then once you sort of see what are the most significant ways, trying to maybe hone in on one of the most distinctive or unique. Um, but there's so many different ways you can go just because the questions are so different. So everything from an obstacle you overcame to a commitment you made. And then sometimes it's, those can be overlapping. So I'm going to give an example. So one of my candidates, um, I mentioned this in a different sort of discussion, but he had a stutter. And so he, as a child, was people made fun of him quite a bit, and he had to overcome that in order to get access to great jobs. And so once he got into his job, he landed a fantastic job after working hard to overcome that stutter. And once he got there, he started to introduce this idea of when you think about DEI, diversity and inclusion, that disability should be part of that. And so the company had really been focusing more on ethnic background and not disability. And so he brought that into the dialogue and started a whole new committee about that. So there's just a lot. And so for him, that would be a natural topic. And when we first started working together, that wasn't even on his radar screen. And so
Hmm.
I had to gently just ask him, "Are you okay presenting this?" Because it, it could be either commitment to community or overcoming an obstacle, but it's just a powerful narrative about his life, the perseverance, the commitment then to empower other people. And so those themes are just dominant themes, and he did very well in the admissions process.
Oh, yeah, it's a wonderful story. I think it's nice to see people be able to overcome that, but then apply it to their essays and eventually get into a program.
Sure.
Yeah, so another question is how can applicants effectively incorporate feedback without losing their own voice?
Me, so from an editor.
Yeah, yeah, or
um
AI or no.
oh no, AI.
Yeah.
Be careful with AI. But well, you just really you'll know after the edit whether it's lost or not. But you don't want it to sound like pasty, like lifeless and flat. And so your tone, when you get an edit back, you should be checking to see is that tone there, because there may be a certain rhythm to your writing, a certain rhythm to your just the way you talk. And so I mean that's the best I can say, because when I do people when we're working people do express that, well, it still sound like me at the end of it, and it should. So if it doesn't, then something went wrong in that editing process. But you should always be developing that base yourself, and
Hmm.
then the editing should just be maybe crystallizing things, making things sharper, saying things more concisely, but the tone should still be there.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And kind of on that note, though, because obviously some tones can come across as inauthentic. So, can you give some examples of what might come across as inauthentic in an essay?
Um, well, if someone is sometimes what's coming straight to my mind is when it sounds arrogant. So sometimes there's just a fine line between touting an achievement and arrogance. And so you want to
Hmm.
make sure that it doesn't sound arrogant in various places. And so, um, and that's just massaging wording. And then otherwise inauthentic, I don't really feel like I come across that often, but for us, we outline the essays with people before they start writing. So I think they're pretty clear on, what they're saying.
Hmm.
Um, but inauthentic, I think would just be, um, indicating something's a passion for you, and then there's nothing to back it up. Um, so just make sure that if there's a theme there, that there's something in your background that's supporting the idea that you care about this. So if someone were to say, I care a lot about diversity and inclusion, but then they don't have anything to show. They were not on a committee, they're not doing any formal mentoring. Maybe they're just citing there's a woman in my area that I coach. It's just not the broad statement you made. I'm passionate about this, I'm fully committed to this. There's no meat behind it, so that would be inauthentic
Hmm.
as well.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. Um, maybe one or two more questions, but you talked about the optional essay. Is there a time when you shouldn't, or should you always use that space?
Well, if there are some schools that say only for extenuating circumstances, so if you don't have something negative to talk about, like a weakness to explain, then in that case, you probably would not use it. A lot of schools just leave it wide open. Is there anything else you want to tell us? And so you could use that space for anything you want. And if you do, it should be value added. It shouldn't be repeating something you've kind of said elsewhere in a different essay.
Hmm.
And so it really just depends on what the wording of the essay was, but there's plenty of times people don't use it. When it's wide open, I prefer to see it used because it's more space for you to make your case. And so usually there is something you can go more in depth about to again add value, shine a light on your strengths.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I guess, yeah, we have a couple minutes, any last words or pieces of advice for people that are doing their Yale essays at this point?
For me, yeah, because the content is so little, you want to really make sure you hone your resume and you're making sure that you get as much in there that's representing all the credentials that you have. And then it is really important to work with your recommendation writers. And so some people will um, give very detailed bullet points, where they're like, I'd love for you to talk about the time I did this. And then they give them the details as reminders so they can kind of draw from that. But you really need to maximize your use of the recommendations. And then the application form itself, any space that you have to talk about your job responsibilities, extracurricular awards, extracurricular achievements, academic achievements, maximize that space because again when you have so little essay content, those other components become much more important in the entire application process. But the one thing I like about Yale is I do feel like Yale gives an opportunity for candidates who have a weak spot. So we've had people who have had low GPAs and they've been able to override it with a great application. We've had people with low GMAT scores where again they're able to override it because especially if they're able to present a strong case for an area that Yale focuses on, social entrepreneurship, healthcare, some financial aspects, that the school, because all the rest of it is so attractive, they're gonna be willing to, kind of ignore one soft spot. So that's why I like it as a school. It really does give an opportunity to candidates that maybe might have one area that's not as strong as we'd like. But it's a great school, obviously, and a great overall university. So I wish everyone great success as they're applying to this great institution.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for to all of you in the audience for joining us on this Yale session. Big thank you to you, Dr. Shell, for just your insight and guidance on these essays. Again, to reiterate, we do hope and wish you all the best as you're writing your essays. But if you do have some needs or want a free consultation from Dr. Shell, feel free to check out her website, and there are some discounts for this week as well. So with that, I want to thank you all and we'll just wish you all the best. All right.
All right. Good
Thank
luck as you
you.
go. Feel free to reach out. Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye bye.